Okay, I think I got it. Um, okay, everyone, I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Wow. Welcome and thank you for being here. What an amazing group we have today. My name is Lisa Marie. I'm on the team here at the Dying Year, and we're so excited to have you for these weekly groups. We have these sessions every single Wednesday as a way to further our connection and knowledge and wisdom in this space. It's for you if you're a doula, if you are an aspiring doula, if you're a loved one, a caregiver, just someone passionate about this work, this space is for you. And yeah, it's been so wonderful to just see how this continues to keep going. Like we never run out of things to talk about. Everybody's story is different, and it's so beautiful to hear from different speakers and to get this continued deepening and uh, yeah, widening of understanding in this work. So thank you all for being here again. Um, just real quick from the dying year, we um, just started a cohort yesterday for our end of life doula training, and that's kicking off. It's going wonderfully. And then we will have another session um, of that training happening in the later part of the summer. So if you or someone you know is interested in that, we'd love to have you. Um, and other than that, reach out to us if you have any questions, if you want to get connected with further resources. We'd love to support you. And yeah, hope that you're able to join these groups as much as you can. We love seeing everyone here. Um, yeah, beautiful. Thank you everyone for introducing yourself in the chat and those who dropped their emails. Okay, perfect. Okay, well, now I'm going to pass it over to our speaker. We have Wendy here today, who is an amazing death doula and film producer, and yeah, someone with such an amazing reputation. We've been hearing about you, Wendy, from other folks in your circle as they've been coming to speak, and I'm just so excited to hear you share your story today. So, yeah, I'm just going to pass it over to you so you can explain. Everything about what you're doing, and we're so grateful. And actually, one thing I want to ask you, Wendy, are you okay with me spotlighting you for the group?
Whatever you need to do.
Okay, cool. Sometimes people
I don't
find that
even know what that means.
distracting. So this is what
Okay.
that means. It makes your face
Oh,
big.
that's fine.
Okay, cool. Just so everyone can see you.
Yeah, I should know what
Okay,
that means, but I don't. Yeah, that's great.
that's okay. Okay,
Yeah, no, that's fine. Here I am. Yeah. I wonder if I don't have, well, it's fine. I could just see myself large. Well, I want to say thank you. I'm so honored to have been asked to be a part of this group. I've been following the Dying Year for as long as I can remember. Lisa Marie, I'm not sure how long you all have been up, at least I think 5, 6 years, as long
hmm
as I've been a doula, which was 2018.
Yep.
So I just applaud you for the variety of topics that you bring to your community. It's so important. This is how people in small communities, large communities connect. So thank you. Um, I am a mom, a death doula, recently a film producer, a wife, and a member of the Minneapolis community. And so life is full and rich. But I had an opportunity in kind of the mid 2010s when death came into my life. And I thought I'd just give you a brief background to I think it's just so important when I meet with clients, when I talk to friends in the death community, to find out where death appeared in their life, or what's the history of death in their lives. So, in general, I would say death was never hidden in my family. I grew up in a Methodist church where it was a spiritual community. Death wasn't fear-based. That said, it was often handled pretty quietly and privately for the most part. Um, in 1977, when I was 3.5 years old, my grandparents, my mother's parents, died in the largest plane crash to date in Tenerife, and they abruptly were gone. That was my first memory with death, and my mom was very open about that loss, she and her brother were emotional people, so they didn't hide their grief. I can remember my mom being in like a full-on fetal position on the ground. And so I was used to holding space at an early age, and I didn't really realize that until I was an adult. But it was a gift. It really was a gift. Um, Later years, when I was in my early 40s, mid 40s, my sister lost a child, Sophia, in stillbirth. And soon after that, we lost our uncle, my mom's brother, Will, to dementia. And that was in 2016. That was 10 years ago. So, right about that time, I was holding new space for end of life. And it was also a time that I was interested in changing careers. I had been a film video producer in my 20s, had a blog about handwriting in my 30s and 40s, sold paper goods, and I knew there was something different. I had no idea what it was. So soon after my uncle died, my sister and I took this beautiful course called Speaking of Dying, which was originally out of Seattle by this woman. She created it, Trudy James. So we took this course about 4 months after our uncle died. There was just this poll that actually was facilitated by a woman. Her name is Laurel Rydell. She's in Minneapolis. If you know anybody in Minneapolis, I highly recommend taking this course, Speaking of Dying. She was actually my midwife for my second and third child. So it was sort of this birth death scenario often. And in this course, there was these facilitated conversations about future healthcare preferences as we created our healthcare directives. And, my sister being a birth doula for 20 years at that point, and me in this new area, we were having all these conversations about life and death. And I just started to realize there was something in there for me that there was like an itch that I thought there's more in death than I've realized that I needed to fall into. I was also just blown away by those simple stats, how often you hear when people are hoping to end their life at home, but it ends up being in a hospital, or how few people actually have their healthcare directive set. So I thought there's something in here. Um, at that point, my sister saw my interest and she said, there are death doulas. And I had never heard of a death doula, but I knew exactly how that could translate, being my sister was my birth doula for my three children. And I thought, of course, there should be. I need to know more about this. And so I dove in right away to hospice volunteering throughout the Twin Cities. I was trained through Anelda in April, May of 2018 with the original trainers there. And around that time, too, there were other individuals in the Twin Cities that were looking for a support system. So we ended up forming the Minnesota Death Collaborative, which I highly recommend going to. I can put the link in the chat. But ironically, two of those co-founders just started their own training program, which I'm happy to share about. It's right now it's live in person. It's called Seeds to Service. But again, if you know people in the Twin Cities, I would want to be surrounded by these two individuals that teach any day. They're just my gurus and so instrumental in my learning. So, side note, let me know if you want to know about training Minneapolis. But I found myself just diving full into this, like looking at death as now an emotional, relational, spiritual, logistical, and deeply human scenario. It was right around this time too that I learned about this book called Choosing to Die that a woman named Phyllis Schachter wrote about her husband who had Alzheimer's. His name is Alan. And I had known about medical aid in dying for a while. I'd hear a little bit about compassionate choices in Minnesota, trying to pass medical aid in dying in our state. But my first exposure to voluntarily stopping eating and drinking, which is the acronym VSED, through Phyllis's book. And, after my uncle had died from Alzheimer's, and we were right about that time seeing signs with our own mother between being frustrated playing the piano, not being able to sort out her calendar, being frustrated about even just like noticing in her handwriting little things. And so being in our family with my uncle, but not knowing what, my grandparents, her parents died at a very young age. We didn't know the history of Alzheimer's in our family. But I handed my mother Choosing to Die this book, and she was still reading at the time, and she read it pretty quickly. And she said, if I have dementia, this is how I want to die. This is how I want to end my life. And I said, okay, noted. We put the book to the side. Um, just over 1 year later, she had a series of tests, 2.5 days in Rochester at the Mayo, and she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. They gave her 3 to 7 years to live. Of course, as we all know, dementia is such a huge umbrella of what may happen in timeline. So it was a little like, okay, uh, emotional, but not surprised. A week later, she approached me and said, I would very much like to lean into VSED when the time is right. And I said, okay, I will support your wish to do that. It wasn't surprising with my mom. This completely came internally from her. She's always been fiercely independent. She witnessed her brother's end stage of dementia, which was very difficult, even in the most respectful, thoughtful way. Extremely difficult to watch someone who owned his own island in the Boundary Waters, built a cabin, spoke Russian, sourdough maker, beer maker, just the salt of the earth, beautiful human. And to see his livelihood, to see his loss of self, confusion, his dependence, his vulnerability was something that we'll never forget and really stayed with us. Also, at the time, I would talk to mom about options such as medical aid in dying in Switzerland. As that was also an option. Um, and she felt that her beliefs were more aligned with VSED. She wanted naturally to have the dying process happen at home. And at that time, she said that VSED really became in her mind the only option that felt right to her. We would talk about kind of a plan B if we wanted to have, a health directive written out where when she was no longer able to feed herself, that she would not want to be force fed. Um, and she was like that. We're not even going to go there because you're not going to let that happen, please. And I said, okay, I got you. I got you. So, it was not about necessarily choosing death, but it was choosing how to live through the end of her life. Um, so right around this time, her story was being seen in the Twin Cities. It was being there was a beautiful story in the Star Tribune sharing mom's decision. She was speaking in front of Compassion and Choices audiences. Her story and my story as a death doula was part of Compassion and Choices magazine and online story. She was giving podcast interviews. So, she was always, she was a teacher. She was comfortable in front of being in an audience, and she was always so true to her word. So it was this beautiful way for her to have like a new purpose. And she wasn't, it wasn't as though like, oh, I have something to do necessarily, but it was almost like, of course, I'll have an opportunity to share this because I want people to know about this. And most people don't understand. She got that. She could see that most people did not know this was an option. So in that, public education, while the disease was progressing, it did give her purpose. Um, Also, around this time, one of our lifelong good family friends, we hadn't been in contact with them for a while, came back into our life. This man, Steven, who was he's an entrepreneur, a pianist, and also like film producer. We asked him if he would play us a piece for my mom for her birthday a couple years before mom died. We surprised her. And so Steven came over. He actually wrote a song called Stunning for my mom, played it, and soon after started having lunches with my sister and my mom. And he said, I really feel that this is a story that needs to be told and documented. And Stephen had lost his father through dementia, and it was a very difficult story and a difficult scenario with his siblings. And Stephen's wife is a film producer, writer, actress, and their best friend and neighbor is a videographer. So they said, "How would you feel, Cheryl, if we documented your life?" And this was about 2 years before her mom died. And she said, "I'm all on board." She had actually been given opportunities through our PBS affiliate here. And she, at that point, said, no, it just didn't feel right. So this time, things were aligned. And so she went forward with that. So I'm thinking maybe, Lisa Marie, this might be a time where we maybe want to show that clip, if that feels right, unless there's any questions I can answer, as where we are right now.
Yeah, maybe if anyone has a question, go ahead and come off mute and you can answer that while I'm pulling up the video, if
If
anyone
anyone.
does.
I can also talk a little bit about what it was like to be a doula for my mom and what I learned through that. I'm happy to talk about that a little bit. Um, the beauty was that because mom, was very aware that she wanted to VSED, we had time on our side. We didn't know, once she was diagnosed, if that window of mom still being cognitive, but really knowing that this was a time where she no longer found joy in life. And, she was definitely understanding that she was giving up good days to avoid bad years. So it was often this constant balance that we would have together. Um, we knew that Alzheimer's, the progression is not linear. And as these good days existed, um, we saw the decline happening. Um, I would say, her VSED statement was very helpful, both when we were approaching her interness about 4 months after she told me she wanted to VSED after she was diagnosed. We went right away to the first appointment we could get, had her VSED statement with us. So it was a little bit more helpful for somebody who was very modern and hip and young, but also was cautious, I'd say, about mom's choice to VSED and said, people want to do this, but it's really hard. So, but I would say that, like, our first VSED statement that we created for her shifted a little bit. It was like the first round was more a little functional markers, I'd say, like when she would need assistance with using the microwave at home or using a remote or getting dressed. Um, those things started to fade, but she still would find joy. So we actually did like a revision to her VSED statement, which stayed true for the last 3 years of her life, which included things like, when I lose the ability to have logical conversations with friends and family, when I'm consistently feeling confused, when I'm wanting to stay home more often, when I become, exhausted with daily activities. These were things that we started to notice in the last year before she VSEDed. Um, she also, as a side note, we made sure that both, the VSED statements were clear that she was not wanting to be hospitalized, that she didn't want food or water during VSED. She wanted only comfort care, and all those specifics that as doulas, we love to be able to understand when we're meeting with clients that, what music they like, do they like to be touched? But, in general, how
Mm,
are we going to bring dignity and grace to mom at this time? And a lot of it too was
mm,
what this looked like, this VSED family and what core people we're going to have. In short, as far as like hospice goes, it was really fascinating because when we first met with hospice, her doctor actually, even though mom was still driving and still very much with it, she said, I will give you the hospice referral to VSED, yes. So we met with hospice a few months later, and I said, "Have you done this before?" And they said, "Well, people do this. They don't call it VSED, but yes, we do support people who would like to stop eating and drinking." And it was pretty simple, which I have to be honest, I was a little shocked. I was like, okay, well, we will call you when we're closer to this time. And
Mm.
then it was almost 3 years later when we did call them and said, okay, mom is closer to wanting to visa, within maybe 2 to 6 months. We basically called them like January of 23. At that point, like that last fall, we had a big party for mom with her 35 best friends who could all meet together. She knew it was her last birthday that November, her last holiday. We were looking into she was still planning some of her final trips that spring before she died. She visited Stephen Colbert's show. She went to Boston to see her best friend. My sister, myself, we went to California to visit her parents' home and see where their ashes were buried along like 90 other bodies that weren't identified. So we did, quite a bit of traveling, and it wasn't easy. It was emotional and hard, but she got very much what was happening. She even understood when she was at the airport, her last trip coming back from Boston, was basically about 3 weeks before she visited, that this was the last time she was in an airport. And so she was able to recognize these things. But um, to go back to hospice really quickly, when I called them to say, my mom was closer to wanting to be said, we want to bring support back on. Over that 3 year period, they had to put steps in place, which was beautiful, in order for one to receive hospice, especially if they had a dementia diagnosis and naturally probably weren't going to had a diagnosis that wouldn't naturally put them on hospice with 6 months or less to live until they started V-setting. So, later on, I heard from a lawyer in St. Paul, Thaddeus Pope, who's a part of our film, who said, he feels pretty confident that the hospice agency that we went with the whole time had to put these new steps in place because they were receiving all these requests for hospice in order to be said. He said it's where the current title of the film comes from, the Cheryl Hauser effect, because he said there's no question. The Dr. Vic Sandler said, well, why are we getting all these requests? He said it's because Cheryl's been in the news and people are learning this as an option. So it's also just a beautiful way for hospices to start understanding how every hospice is going to be different, how or if they take on a visa client and what that looks like. So as a side note, it's another reason why we feel like this film is so important and valuable. So hospices start having these conversations.
Mm. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
So sorry, I
really
kind of went on that
beautiful.
side note a little bit, but yeah.
No, thank you. That's really helpful to hear. Just really quick before I show the clip, just because people ask questions about what you were specifically saying. Craig asked, did you have medical assistance with the VSED, like to help with cravings?
Well, we used medication through hospice, and I would say between lorazepam, Haldol, and morphine. It does, the combination of that can help with cravings. There's not one specific drug that helps with it's not, it's more the missing of water, really. And so for that reason, we would spray bits of water into my mom's mouth. We would give her a cold spoon. We would distract her a lot. We would brush her hair. We would rub her feet. We would sing to her. We would remind her she's safe. All those things that you would want to do to anybody. I mean, to be honest, she started forgetting a lot by the second day. We started VSED at a kind of the ideal time, I have to say, for mom, because as I mentioned, she was still traveling a bit. But days were just getting more emotionally stressful. And we had already started planning on a particular week for VSED and had been talking to hospice and getting things set. But still, I'd say like my sister and my mom's husband were a little like, oh, but our days are so good. Are we sure this is right? Like, she still understands A, B, and C. And then one day, about a month before she VSEDed, she forgot her birthday and she couldn't remember her address. And around that time, she started confusing both of my sons. And those were definitely markers of, okay, we need to make this happen for you, Mom. And beautifully, I have to say, I had a fear that I was going to have to bring it up to my mom, saying like, Mom, if you, as I said, if this is something you want to do, we need to bring this on now. Thankfully, and it would have been okay if we did. She trusted us, but one early April afternoon, I was driving my mom up to my sister's cabin, and I said, "How are you doing?" And she said, "I need to be gone next month. I need to start VSED next month." And I said, okay, well, next month is in 3 weeks, and that's not tomorrow, but it can be it will be here soon. And she said, yeah, I can't do this anymore. So, but all of that said, 2 days into V-setting, my mom was forgetting why she was V-setting. She was forgetting us. She was confused. I would say my mom, part of the disease, she was somebody even before she had Alzheimer's. She wasn't impatient of like, I need something now, but she definitely was thinking, yeah, well, if I'm planning on seeing my parents in heaven, then bring me there now. I don't want to wait around for this. I mean, yes, she very much orchestrated her VSED days where she was wanting to have her church group singing there. She wanted a threshold choir. She wanted a heart visit, all of these beautiful things which happened. But I think it was between the dehydration, ramping up her meds, and just the disease starting to take over. She was forgetting why she had asked to be said. So we had to just bring gentle reminders in. And it was okay. It never got to the point where we had to play videos for her or do anything to a certain degree. But um, to get back to that first question, we tried to soothe any desire for water with maybe amping up the medication a little bit and doing those other little approaches that I mentioned.
Mm, thank you. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and share the clip now, and then we can come back to questions and more discussion. Okay, can everyone see my screen? Cool. Okay.
How will I die?
You'll fall asleep, and then you're gonna hear beautiful bells. Then you're gonna see a beautiful golden light. You will be free.
My motto in life is I came to live out loud.
My mom's always been joyous and bountiful.
If there was one word that describes Cheryl, it would be vivacity.
Some people say only God could decide when you're going to die. That's not my God.
Are you a teacher?
I was a daughter of a teacher. I was the daughter of you.
I'll put it in very stark terms. My wife is losing her mind.
What am I supposed to do?
You want to sign it, Cheryl?
Do I know how to do that?
Well, you used to, but maybe not today.
When I was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, I knew right away that I would not allow anybody to take my dignity. I'm not going to hell. I'm going to do it my way.
A life well lived and a death well planned.
My brother died of Alzheimer's. We actually watched him suffering.
She decided she would hasten death through a process called VSED, voluntarily stop eating and drinking.
I'd like to welcome Wendy and Cheryl up to the stage.
I wanted to educate people so that they know they have choices. There are ways to do this that are not painful.
Cheryl, are you prepared for the end of your life?
Absolutely. I am choosing to die this way.
I think it's on everybody's mind. How will you know when it's time?
When nothing matters to me.
Bring it on, Red.
I tell patients, I can't give you anything to expedite your death, but you can do something for yourself. You can stop eating and drinking.
What do you buy your mother, knowing it's her last birthday?
Today is day one of the VSED. She asked me if she could have some water, and I said no. It was just the most heartbreaking thing.
Everyone has said, I want water.
When I don't understand what you're doing.
We really want to hold that line. It is not being cruel, it is being compassionate.
You've just had such an amazing journey in this world. You're going to make this next journey just as beautiful.
Everybody pours their heart out to you.
The reaction to the story has really been quite remarkable.
I guarantee you the reason for why you're seeing all these increased numbers of VSED requests is because of Cheryl Hauser.
People having these choices is so important, so thank you so much.
I want to see this as a final step into freedom.
You're doing it your way. You are a hero to so many people.
Thank you for playing that. I do want to just mention one thing. We are, I can dive back a little bit into the film. Thanks for all your hearts. They're so sweet. You're making me cry. As a doula and experiencing my mother's VSED, that teaser is raw, but it's real, right? To people that aren't necessarily in the death world or are questioning, the process of VSED and the decisions around it, it can throw some people because, my mother forgets why she's doing it. My stepfather says, he said no when she asked for water. We did more of that gentle, like, instead of water, can we put a spray in your mouth? Or if you have water, that means that VSED process is done. So I think, there's nuances that before we go in this summer, which I'll talk about, we're going to be diving into the full edit this summer. But we're probably going to tweak the existing teaser, which what you just saw exists. It's on the website. It's on the second page of the website under film details. So if you want to listen to that again ever or send it to somebody, fabulous. But I do want to say that we'll probably in the next month, we're just going to tweak the teaser just a little bit so it feels maybe more approachable to those people that are a little thrown by the rawness of it. I'd say too, part of the film and part of why we're wanting to put this together, if you look at the website, you will read about how we have, 50, 60 hours of footage just from the past 2 years or last 2 years of my mom's life. And then about 50 hours of footage of her first 72 years of life, 74 years. She died when she was 76. But, when we were making this film, we knew that it wasn't going to be just about my mom, although certain film producers might say, oh, this is a beauty story. She has such a character feel to her. just roll with that. But we also knew this was a way that we could educate the public and get more specialists on board with, as you saw, there was a Dr. Nick Sandler, a part of the teaser, as well as Thaddeus Pope. Just a week and a half ago, we headed to Bellingham, Washington, and Seattle, where we filmed Phyllis Schachter, who wrote the book Choosing to Die, because we wanted to make sure she would be a part of the film. We also filmed Dr. Hope Wetchkin, who is out of Seattle, Washington, and who is just a remarkable hospice doctor who has been a part of Visa quite a bit. We met with a woman named Erin Glass, who's a lawyer who specializes in advocating around end of life and VSED, a VSED attorney, basically. And then we will be filming a death doula in Seattle. Her name's Crystal Cannon Flores when we go back to Seattle for an event in September. And all of her cases are VSED because we want, I mean, this is going to be a shorter documentary. For a few reasons. One, because we want families to be able to watch this and sit with it in a smaller period of time and not feel like they have to devote an hour and a half of their time to really diving in. We also want hospice agencies and medical organizations to be able to have an hour meeting to watch this for part of the time and then talk about, okay, how can we relate to this and what are things that we can do to help support? Because we don't feel like this option is going away anytime soon as far as people's interest in it. And there's such a lack of education and understanding. And it matters, right? Like we want there to be a reduction in stigma around dementia and end of life choices. We want families and professionals to be able to, navigate difficult decisions earlier on. And we feel like, this film shows the emotional and relational realities of what dying looks like. And so with this film, we're really hoping that it offers like this intimate background and like an ethically grounded look at our family's experience. There'll also be, because we're filming all these incredible specialists, we can't get all that into the short film. So, right now, even on my website, I have links to VSED resources like End of Life Washington, VSED Resources Northwest, other places. Similar to these beautiful people and websites, we will have on our own website and the film's website links to longer sound bites from these specialists because I do think that, as all of you know, yes, information, bullet points, lists are all helpful in these VSED websites, but sometimes to listen and hear the emotions and knowledge and have that like person to person or person to video in this case experience, we really want to have these sound bites a part of the resources that people may be looking for if they, be it a death doula, be it somebody who has been diagnosed with a disease, be it that you're a partner or a child of somebody who is recently diagnosed with dementia. Not everyone out there will be as, I'm not going to say brave, but as like wanting to jump into something like my mom did. And so we want there to be options for people. And we're not hoping that everybody agrees with this option, but we just want fewer people to feel like they're alone in these conversations.
Yeah, Ellen.
Thanks, Wendy. Thank you. Thank you, Lisa Marie. I put in the chat a copy of an article and date of a Jerry Pal podcast with a palliative hospice physician from the Northwest about minimally comfort feeding, which I thought people might be interested in if they don't know about it, especially for institutions potentially dealing with the moral injury that you all very bravely show in the clip of helping your mother when she doesn't remember what her original decision was. And that Jerry Powell includes an ethicist who's sort of holding up the counter uh, argument of, is an advance directive still valid when someone loses their competence? And a lawyer who very compellingly argues that that's the very nature of an advance directive. So those resources are in there, and I just wanted to flag that. And then, Wendy, I was just wondering, is when you mentioned being able to get your mom admitted to hospice, it used to be that failure to thrive was a diagnosis that allowed admission, but I think those have been narrowed to the point where if you don't have a 6 month terminal diagnosis, is the admission still possible without getting in trouble assuming it's a Medicare, not a private pay, or even if it's a private pay patient? I just wondered if you'd run into that with people saying, no, we're not going to be able to qualify because we can't get, our hospice isn't comfortable that you actually have that 6 month prognosis. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Ellen. It's funny. Someone from Seattle just sent me that article. I haven't read it yet, but I'm wondering if Thaddeus Pope was part of that Jerry Powell. Yeah, you're nodding. Okay, yes. And I love seeing too, Andrea, your note here. I just saw Nancy Simmers last week. She was at our Bellingham panel. So Nancy was in the audience. She handed me her book. It was kind of incredible. We had between Phyllis Schachter there and Kate Christie is another beautiful human who wrote a book about it's called the VSED Handbook. And Nancy was also there. So there's just such, and I have to say we did videotape and it will be it's on a YouTube page, that particular panel, which I think could be really helpful. So log on, starts checking on our website. If you want to, you can enter your information on the website and you'll get updates. But yeah, so there'll be information there and links to a YouTube with some of these people that you've just mentioned. So the film is not going to go into minimal comfort feeding because it's just too short and it's specialized. And I think it's something that's really new and people are figuring out. I mean, Dr. Hope Wetchkin out of Seattle is very in tune to that. To answer your question about when hospice comes on board, it's so specific to that community and to that doctor and to the person. What I encourage people to do is to start meeting with their internists and whomever they have the best relationship with as soon as possible, as far as their desire to do this. So it's just in their history and they can pull up, somebody in later years when they're more ready to VSED or when that window is happening where it's time to VSED, that they can say, oh, look, Carol Brown had been asking for VSED or asking for hospice 3 years ago, knowing that she had a diagnosis. She's been wanting to do this. She's very clear. So I think that like the more and if you see that your hospice agency or your healthcare group is definitely like you kind of have to do your research. If you see, oh, they've never started hospice early for somebody who wants to voluntarily stop eating and drinking, then you really want to look at a different hospice agency. I think this is when death doulas can be very helpful to start that conversation and figure out, okay, who's this team? Who's our VSED circle of support that is on this? I know that Dr. Hope's hospice group in Seattle, who Crystal, the doula I mentioned, they've created a scenario where that hospice team starts on day 2. And that has worked out well. Ideally for me as a doula, I really like to know, my hope is that this hospice team can start on day 1 and they understand that naturally without VSEDing, would this client die in 6 months? No, but they do have a terminal disease and they would be dying within the next few years. And they have enough belief and understanding that once this person starts VSEDing, especially after day 3 and 4, when their organs start to fail, it it will be faster and they will be dying soon. So I also know of, even in a state like Hawaii, where medical aid in dying is legal, I have spoke with doulas there that hospice wouldn't come on until very late in the process. So it is an area where I think we're going to see a lot of change and a lot of questions, and a lot of education is needed. Even yesterday, I ran into a doctor who's a hospice doctor in the Twin Cities, and she mentioned that they're tweaking a little bit, and I would think just for clarity, but they're tweaking the parameters needed. That basically, one, always, in this case, they go through palliative care first. So they don't even start in hospice, but they must start with having an evaluation through palliative care. And so for my mom, that meant, I think there was like 3 or 4 different steps. She met with a palliative care social worker, had a psych evaluation, met with a chaplain. I think, like all these different people are having different perspectives and angles of making sure that my mom or whomever they were speaking to is not feeling pressure to do this. This is something out of their own beliefs. I think that is how hospice teams understand this is something they want to be able to support. My first client was a year before my mom VSEDed. He was late 40s, had Huntington's disease. He had seen his mom die from this, and he was very clear that he was starting to do things that were very scary. He knew that he did not want to die from this disease. And so hospice was beautiful. They jumped in on day one, and we had a VSED statement. We were able to find a hospice home that supported him. We made all of the, very needed steps to make sure that someone was always in the room. Even if the hospice home was supportive of it, we wanted to make sure that there was no staff member that didn't understand what was going on and offered him water. We wanted to make sure there were signs above his bed and at the front door asking people to take a deep breath before coming in the room, to feel grateful for their time, to not bring in any coffee or liquids or food to make it hard. There was lots. It's an orchestrated, beautiful gift that you're providing your person if this is what they want to do, but it does take planning. Yeah.
Thank you, Wendy. Yeah, let's go to Catherine.
Hi, Wendy. I'm sure we've been in the same rooms before. I am a Minneapolis native who recently moved to Ann Arbor to transition from a 40-year career as a professional actress in Minneapolis and Los Angeles, and a producer, director as well. So we have a lot in common. I just wrapped up my career like 2 days ago, shot a commercial in Detroit, left the union, and I'm like out. And I'm very excited about transitioning from sort of a volunteer death midwife to professional, because it is my profession. It's what I profess myself to. And I've gotten really clear over the past few weeks, especially attending the Plan Well, Live Well Death conference they had here like 2 weekends ago. That VSED is absolutely like the thing that I'm most stoked about letting the world know about and helping people with. So in addition to educating people about it, I would like to hold people's hand through it if they would like, and they don't have someone to do that with them. 2 things I'm wondering. What sort of training? I did my death midwifery training through Sacred Crossings in California. I've been volunteering under Jane Whitlock at the Providence Place in Minneapolis. I'm sure you know her. And yeah, we're big fans. So like what kind of training? I've looked into going to maybe like an entry level kind of nursing school, not like getting a 2 or 4 year degree, but some kind of nursing. I have done home health aid training and certification in Los Angeles. And then like books to read, just how can I educate myself better before I start offering this? And then legality, I didn't think about it too much, but some friends and family are like, what if the family of the dying want to sue you because you helped them do this? So like what kind of insurance do you recommend for people that want to offer this to people that are not friends and family, but clients?
Yeah. Hi, Catherine. I recognize your name for sure. And I think let's have I want to have a longer conversation, you being in production, because if you look at our site, we've raised 80 out of the 300,000, and we want this to get spread out and people involved. So
Yeah,
Would
yeah.
love to talk to you about that. But
Yeah, I've been
um,
following your film like since the beginning too, and I just realized
oh,
when I
well,
hopped on the call, I was like, oh, this is that person. So that's
oh,
really
I love
exciting.
it. Big
Yeah.
circle. And yes,
Yeah.
please let and right now the hope is that we're gonna have a screening of the teaser in Menlo Park, like so, in California in the fall. Aside from I saw some Portland people on the call and Seattle. We'll have events in September there. To answer your questions. I've always had insurance from CMNF. I think it's about $300 for as a doula. So I think all doulas really need to have insurance. Um, I make sure that each client has filled out a healthcare directive specifically for VSED and that, there's witnesses that are you've signed that. And if a family wants it notarized, that's fine. I make sure that there are no family members that are anti, or if they are, like how we work as a team to make sure that they're not going to stop this process from happening. I mean, this is a legal choice. Someone
Yeah.
can't stop eating and drinking, and the more that they have things recorded, have their visa statement signed, they're working with a hospice team. Those are all like no one has ever been sued for visa because like there's just
Okay,
you
great.
want to be able to have these items in place just as backups. You want to make sure that like that you're looking and you also ideally want to be having conversations and be a part of this person who wants to be said like 2 months before ideally. I mean, that said, I just met with a family Monday and he's starting to be said next Monday, but it's like a gut intuitive sense that this is a supported natural beautiful community and he had already started hospice. So and that hospice team um, even though they weren't a hospice team that I've worked with or a healthcare agency that I've worked with before, for them to be able to say, oh yes, we've supported people through VSID before, it was like, okay. So then you know that nobody on their team is going to be questioning. I'd say looking at who your home care aides are, like if you have private people coming in, that's an area that you want to make sure that they are either insured or that the people they work for understand what you're asking of them to do. So there's no question around that. In Phyllis's book, one of her original home health aides that were with Alan brought in social services. And Phyllis had a beautiful story. Social services came, they saw how sacred it was, they saw everything that they had planned. Phyllis sat down with this woman and was like, come to my classroom, let me share this with you. And so I think it can be like in this case, it was a learning experience. But I have had cases where I know of a son who was very anti his mother's option to be said, and he's an unstable person. And so we've actually put her visa on hold for other reasons, but at certain points, I thought we maybe need to visa in a location he doesn't know about. As long as we're doing everything safe and legally, then it's more about the safety of people in that scenario of just making sure that that none of the people involved were going to be hurt from someone's strong feelings and against his mother doing this. And then as far as practice, I would say a combination of seeing other doulas that are in your communities that are doing this kind of work. Sometimes even if you reach out to sources like VSID Resources Northwest or Compassion and Choices in your state, they might know of doulas that are doing that kind of work. I think just putting yourself out there on social media, saying I'm looking for experience, and then you got to jump in. And I think, I do think that being able to feel confident that you have some of these things that I said, like aligned and that you're feeling that like you have kind of checked these boxes. I know that VSID Resources Northwest, I think it's that site. There's actually a link to how like what the role of a death doula means, which I had never seen before as far as like, being in the scenario. And that's a really good way to see like check, check, check. Do I have all these things? Am I feeling comfortable with all these responsibilities here? So I would go to that site and they're just, I mean, VSID Resources Northwest are just really helpful. Jen, Kate Christie, who wrote the Visas Handbook, is part of that group, and they're just always they got a lot on their plate, but they're taking like 4 or 5 phone calls each week from places all over the country, trying to help them placing, like trying to figure out through NIDA site or other site, looking for death doulas that can help walk them through. And sometimes they can't, they can't do everything. I think a lot of times they look at, oh wow, there are people, you hear people starting to visit on their own, and then after 2 3 days they call them like, oh, this is going on, my person's weak. Yeah, it makes sense. You should probably stop what you're doing and let's like backtrack a bit and get that support system so you all can be safe.
Yeah.
And
Thank you so much.
remember, I mean, I haven't stated this, but voluntarily stopping eating and drinking is something that people have been doing for thousands of years. It's just now with dementia being more in the limelight and people living longer, and 1 out of 4 people over the age of 80 have some sort of dementia diagnosis. People are wanting to talk about what options they have. And so it's why it's becoming more. But people, I can't tell you how many times I've heard stories of like, oh, my grandmother did this, but we never wanted to talk about it. And I also get phone calls of like, oh, these people have been trying to do this, but they're on their 20th day. And I'll talk to them and I'll hear, well, they're sucking on an ice cube or they're having a mint here and there. And it's like that can extend your life quite a bit of time. So we want this to be a succinct, supportive option. And it is something where just talking about these options, talking about death, it's not wanting to diminish life. If anything, you want to be like you're more present in life when you talk about this beforehand. But it does clarify to people what matters most. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Wendy. And I just have to say, I don't know if the phone call came through while you were speaking, but then my phone rang and it was my mother, who's very likely to be my first client. She was diagnosed with Alzheimer's last year. And this just occurred to me in this moment. I was on my path to becoming a death midwife at age 11 when my mom said, please put a pillow over my face if I can't take care of myself. And I agreed at 11. Some people would say that's an inappropriate request to make of a child, but I've thought about that for 40 years, that like when my mom doesn't want to be here anymore, I'm going to be the one to help her exit. And now it's all coming full circle. So thank you so much.
It's really beautiful. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, we'll take Karma's question and then we'll bring it to a close. But thank you, Wendy, and thanks everyone.
Thank you, Lisa Marie. And as usual, thank you for this gathering. I'm in my 60s. I've got a lot of background. I'll skip all of that. I work in research for legal and medical fiduciary, and I've got 3 ideas that I want to share. Number 1 is Catherine Campion. Please go to, I'm dropping it in the chat right now. Michigan is on fire with the Omega Network homes, and that would be the answer to hospice fraud that we're seeing in the news so much, which is not new. Hospice fraud in my 40 years of working is not new. But one of the ways that number 2 shows up is moral injury that Ellen mentioned. The legal part of that is when there is force feeding, wrongful resuscitation, or the fraud that keeps failure to thrive, what we used to call, as Ellen said, on service for hospice in cases up to 4 years. I've made those Office of Inspector General reports myself. I've talked with Thaddeus Pope about how all this legality stuff moves, that we have staff who are suffering moral injury from being forced to force feed and to keep people on service. These are just things that are happening that in collecting stories, which I'm sure all of us are here because we have a story to share, this issue of how is this going to roll into the future is what you have this opportunity, Catherine, any of you out there that can make a film, collect stories that highlight starting your sizzle reel with the moral injury that occurs when a system gone wrong. Well, Wall Street built private equity healthcare, so I'm not sure they think it's built so wrong, but in any case, the regulatory landscape right now is perfect because Medicare is looking at entitlement funded programs. So the reason I get geeky, and you guys are welcome to, email me or whatever, but if you can start a nonprofit hospice VSED home, there's a couple of those in Seattle that quietly operate. They're not necessarily going to be difficult to operate as a nonprofit. And you can still work as a nonprofit hospice home with your hospice agencies. The thing is, I want to leave you with this. Please collect stories about moral injury of staff and get into the weeds a little bit about the legalities and the culture change around entitlement. Because having worked in Hawaii, my first case of MAID was in Oregon in 1998. I've worked in Tennessee, I've worked in Minnesota, I'm licensed in all these states. The point is that we have crowds that you could not even be invited to show your sizzle reel in this country. In other words, the regional differences are so important to highlight in your film because you have this opportunity to go underneath the top story to the culture change that really is what you're helping to bring about. You're helping to midwife that. And so, Catherine, I think you said but please visit all of the Omega homes in Michigan and consider starting a VSED home there if that's where you are, because there are more than in any other state in Michigan. And I'll stop there. I don't want to get too geeky, but please consider collecting moral injury stories of staff around those three areas: wrongful resuscitation, the outright fraud of wrongful prolongation, whether it's in a special advance directive for dementia, a SAD or not, and the force feeding, how we even define that. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Karma. Thank you.
So awesome.
Yeah, thank you. Well, and I just, Lisa Marie, I just wanted to quickly, I was looking at some of these questions. Someone said, where is the film? So the film is not finished. We did just film more or less weekend. I'd say we have one or two other interviews, but it's close. I mean, it's close to now diving in. But we are needing to raise money in order to finish it. So if you know of organizations, if you know of people that would give $5, would give $500, that they have had a negative or beautiful positive experience with VSED and they see the reasons behind this, have them call me. Even nonprofits, if they have no money and they want to be involved, we look at that. Anyway, it's so word of mouth, and any way that you can spread the story in this film, I greatly appreciate it. And someone also had said, why didn't couldn't she have used MAID? Just to clarify, in no state are you legally able to use medical aid in dying with something like a dementia disease, where you're cognitively not able to make that decision of why you take that medication with only 6 months or less to live.
Yeah, thank you so much, Wendy. And thank you to all the questions and comments and resources in the chat. I know that folks shared the link a few times for the film and for the website where you can find that clip. Definitely recommend you all finding that. And you said people can enter their email, right? Like you have a newsletter.
Exactly. Yep. There's a little place on the bottom of most pages, I think maybe under film details, and you can enter your information there. We're on social media. We will be interviewed in a couple weeks for PBS. They're actually doing like a series with my sister and myself on the 250-year anniversary, where they're looking at different roles that people have and how they're finding it is basically the pursuit of happiness and what that looks like with life and death. And could I read one thing before we're off?
Sure.
And then I was looking through some old paperwork of my mom's, and I found this like beautiful kind of informational letter to inform friends after their parents had died. And it was like typed up old school. And there's the picture of her parents, Helen and Arthur, there that passed away in the plane crash in 1977. And my mom wrote in here, which I thought was so beautiful. She said, "For they are not gone really. The bodies which they inhabited for a while have been destroyed, it is true. but their soul lives endure in realms of consciousness and space which we, the living, cannot begin to comprehend. Part of the endless universe now, Helen and Art are with us, and at the same time with all those who have gone on before them. Death is merely the beginning of a new and different stage in the journey we are all embarked upon. And I thought, well, there goes my mom. Coming full circle, she was writing about this in 1977, and how beautiful to continue that work. So thanks for letting me share that.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, I just want to close with um, a recognition of the work that you're doing, Wendy. And I, yeah, it's not lost on me how tender of a thing this is and how sacred the experience you had with your mother is, and how, um, I don't even know if brave is the right word, but just how real it is that you're willing to like open it up and let everyone see that. 'Cause yeah, that's y'all experience that you live together, and for all of us to get a peek into that and to see what that was like for you is yeah, a big honor, and something that, yeah, I don't think any of us should take lightly. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you for acknowledging that, Lisa Marie. It is truly a gift. I didn't foresee myself having this aspect of being a death doula be so personal and so open. But between this production group that came our way, and then also I have to say we were part of what's on the website is a journal where we documented each day of Mom's visa journey, and we originally just had it there so our good friends could see what was going on. I didn't think we'd make it public. And then my sister, being a little bit more out there, she somehow she was like, "We're sharing it." I was like, "Okay, fine." And then just within the day after she died, of me showing up at like graduation parties for friends, having these strangers come up to me and say, "I can't tell you how much this affected me. I was following your story each day." I just realized, okay, people need to hear the story. And so yeah, we just haven't looked back, and I have just, as a death doula, it's been a gift to meet other people in different communities that are holding different kind of space for end of life. I mean, just recently I was in Portland and connected with this group of people that are opening this place called The Lantern that holds space for grief. And it's just this beautiful, they're revising a church there. And it's just like, look at this, like one full community space where grief can come together, and you're able to, and that's what we need. And so I hope that wherever this leaves you, it brings more opportunities to see how you can gently fold, end of life and death, which is ultimately life and full circle, into your own lives, and maybe tap into others too.
Mm, beautiful. Thanks so much, Wendy.
Yeah.
Thank you everyone for being here, and maybe we can have you back again in the future when the film is close to being released, or any updates that you want to share with us, please let us know. Yeah, thank you all so much. I hope you have a beautiful day. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you for having me.